Imagine a president of the United States who looks at other countries with a level of respect and understanding without fear. Imagine a president of the United States who understands the impact that a great nation like ours can have to a small village near Kisumu in Africa, not because he's gotten a policy briefing, but because he has a grandmother who lives in that little village. Imagine a president of the United States who was raised like I was, with values, things like truth matters, honesty counts, that your word is your bond, you do what you say. See, we were raised to understand that when you're a working class kid out here, you don't feel entitled to anything. That you know you have to work harder, be tougher, be smarter, be quicker than anyone. You do it. And you treat other people with dignity and respect, even if you don't know them and you don't agree with them. And there is nothing more important in this world than your commitment to your family and your community. Imagine a president of the United States who will bring that kind of sensibility to the Oval Office. We haven't seen that in a long time. But what Barack did was he took those values and put them into action, always trying to figure out how to live those values. See, because when you were raised like us, watching your parents and grandparents sacrifice for you, you know that you're blessed. And you know that to whom much is given, much is expected. So you don't sit on your blessings. So what does Barack do? The first major decision he had to make in his life after college, do I go to Wall Street and make money, or do I work for the people? Barack worked as a community organizer in some of the toughest neighborhoods on the south side of Chicago, helping young mothers find their voice and their power, folks who had a reason to be cynical because government had forgotten them long ago. There is no one else in this race who can claim that kind of commitment to people on the ground. No one. And I would think as a nation like ours, we would demand that kind of engagement before you could even consider wanting to be president of the United States. But it doesn't stop there. Barack's a lawyer, I'm a lawyer, probably everybody in this auditorium's a lawyer, too many lawyers. And many of the lawyers in this race made their millions before they decided to help the people, not Barack. Not because he couldn't, because Barack was the first African-American president of the Harvard Law Review. No one else can claim that distinction. No one else can. You talk about raising the bar. Set the bar, Barack leaped over the bar. But what did he do with those skills? He didn't sell them to the highest bidder. He became a constitutional law scholar, a civil rights attorney in a small firm. Why? Because to whom much is given, much is expected. And when you are given the gift of advocacy, you give it to the least of these. Barack goes into politics not to amass power. Barack is not naive. When you worked on the streets and you worked in the halls of justice, you know you can't just make change with hope. You've got to be able to affect the powers that be. So he goes into the Illinois State Senate for 8 years. No other candidate in this race can claim that amount of years at the state legislative level. And wouldn't it be nice to have a president who understood how federal law impacts local government? And let me tell you something, just wasn't in any state. It was in Illinois, some of the meanest, toughest politics. We live in Chicago, people. Don't worry about whether Barack is tough enough to handle the Republicans. We have seen it all. And in that climate of challenge, Barack brought his values to the table and was able to get things done. Things like expanding health care for kids in our state, passing ethics reform in a state that hadn't seen it in more than 25 years. working on racial profiling, helping to mend a broken death penalty system that sent dozens of innocent men to death row. See, these aren't issues you take on because you're trying to curry favor. These are issues you take on because you're trying to work for change. Barack is one of the most respected politicians in the state of Illinois because of his values. And if you want to know how values and judgment and courage affects decisions, we need only look at the war in Iraq. And I will never let anybody forget that, because that was an instance where all the years of Washington insider conventional thinking didn't get us to the right answer. Now, what his opponents will say is that Barack didn't have to take a vote, but what they won't tell you is that Barack wasn't voting because he was in the midst of trying to get to the U.S. Senate. When he spoke out, he was in the midst of his own tough U.S. Senate primary, a race that he wasn't supposed to win. Because you know what they were saying about Barack in Illinois? Mean, tough Illinois. They said he was too young. They said that he was too inexperienced. They said he should wait his turn. They said he couldn't raise the money. They said he couldn't build the political organization to match an Illinois family that had been running for years. Does this sound familiar? They said he was too black. They said that he wasn't black enough. And then when all that didn't work, they threw in a fear bomb and they said his name is funny, and there's no way that white folks in downstate Illinois will vote for a man named Barack Obama. So let me tell you something, people. If Barack doesn't look upset when he's getting slung with those mud pies, it's because he's heard it all before. See, one thing we have learned is that when power is confronted with real change, they will say anything. But even in that climate, Barack stood tall and he said, let me try telling people what I think. And he said publicly, this war is wrong. It's going to cost us millions of dollars and thousands of lives. And the beauty of that is that he still won his U.S. Senate seat by wide margins. He won among blacks and whites and women and men, upstate, downstate, progressives. Because you see, the truth is, America can handle the truth.